the question is it impossible to isolate Russia? I probably would rephrase it, how we do that. That would be the more productive way to start the discussion. And I think that I probably start with one maybe not very significant episode which happened recently, just which probably allow us to think broader. Just last month in Thailand, far away, the Russian embassy demanded from the, appealed to the ministers of the foreign affairs of Thailand and demanded to extradite, not very, big, it was not significant incident, but the Belarus-Russian, rock band to be extradited to Russia. They were in the end, they stayed, they were later managed not to go, it's opposition band, to Israel. But what was significant in this thing that we won't consider Thailand to be the country which is is a clear Russian alliance. And that was something to show Russia that, we will touch you that far away in the country you do not expect. We all speaking, we think we are very global. We are the global, allies of Ukraine. That's us to isolate Russia. But so far we see today that even in such places, the Russians are showing we are present. And for instance, Interpol and other organizations, they won't stop Russian war criminals. So we see that we may be even lagging behind. And maybe we are wishful thinking that we are isolating Russia. Carl Bildt mentioned Maldives. I would mention a lot of countries which allowed Russia to overcome the sanctions. And I think, Alex, I will start with you, because you I know that you listed the ways how to do that, and that would be the good start. I think one was already mentioned shortly today, the Kerch Bridge. At least that shouldn't be there. But please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think it's interesting to put the question in perspective. What do you mean by isolate? What's the example? Well, probably the most isolated country in the world is North Korea. And maybe the question is, can we get Russia to a position which is similar to North Korea? That should certainly be the goal, because they are very affected by a whole range of international sanctioning and other regimes. So, first of all, I'd say that is look at direct sanctioning and direct trade. And unfortunately, many, even Western companies, big Western companies, are directly trading, producing in Russia. So I, this week, have started a campaign against Mondelez, which is a big food company. They own Cadbury's, which is an iconic brand in the UK. Their chief executive, unfortunately it's an American firm, I'm sorry, Don. Their chief executive, Dirk van der Put, said, investors do not morally care whether companies can continue to do business in Russia. Adding that no shareholders have pressured it to leave after the invasion of Ukraine. So that's something we need to change. I wrote to him alongside some other members of parliament asking for them to pull out of Russia. 2.8% of their global sales are in Russia. So it's a big deal for them. And so we need to directly ensure that Western companies are no longer operating and selling in Russia. Then there's the use of third countries. We've seen use of third countries, for instance, for both ways, selling Russian goods, particularly oil and gas, but also in terms of the imports, say drones, for instance. Non-military drones being imported to a third country and then being forward imported to Russia. Then we have a lot of frozen assets. We need to seize those assets and repurpose them to Ukraine. We need to ensure we have full travel bans and that no NATO country has direct flights between Russia, particularly Moscow, and their country, and they still do. And then my party very much supports the establishment of a special tribunal for war crimes to prosecute Putin and the leaders of the war. I think if we can move on all of those issues, and that's really started to isolate Russia. But you're right, we do need to look at other people who are not necessarily in the camp of our direct allies and their relationship with Russia, but I'll stop there.
I would pass to Tamila Tasheva because, again, I think it's very important to understand what's happening with Crimea. With some of the years ago, we won't think that the Russian fleets should move from Sevastopol to the, the Russian borders. And however, we know it's possible, even without very strong navy, with due respect to the Ukrainian navy. So what would be the things?
Thank you, Natalia. I will speak Ukrainian. Що тут дуже важливо відзначити?
It is very important to note here, yes, it's in reality that although we don't have Ukrainian Navy, our armed forces are actively influencing the Crimean Peninsula. We are reaching the Kerch Bridge. We also reaching military bases and other military objects on the territory of Crimea. And we have a very serious and positive reaction from local population to this. We are monitoring very closely what people in Crimea are saying. And we've seen some classified research about this. We researched the pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian groups of population in Crimea who actually both thought that if Ukraine destroys the bridge of Kerch, which is probably the biggest symbol of Russian presence on the territory of the peninsula, the myth about the powerfulness of the Russian Federation will be in fact ruined. And the pro-Russian population in Crimea says about this. I am Tamila Tasheva. I am a Crimean Tatar who was born in deportation in Samarkand in Uzbekistan. And if you ask any Crimean Tatar when the war with Russia started with them, they would say this could be 1786 when Catherine I ruined the Crimean Khanate, or 1944 when our entire nation was deported from Crimean Peninsula. That's not about the revision of history. It's about the continuity of the crime that the Russian Federation, first the Russian Empire, then the Soviet Union, and now the Russian Federation in its present embodiment is committing for centuries. And it hasn't paid once for its crimes against Ukrainians or Crimean Tatars. So the major issue in the discussion about the isolation, if they have not repented because of the crimes that they committed against these people, like the crime of deportation of Crimean Tatars, what can we say in addition? The war, for me, started 10 years ago when they occupied my native peninsula, my native land. For 10 years, I cannot go to my home places. I can't see my parents. My grandmother has died, and I couldn't say final farewell to her because we didn't have the proper reaction for 2014. Regrettably, we now have events of 2022 and 24, when thousands and thousands of our people are dying in this war. So if we are talking, and when we are talking about the isolation of Russia, we should at last do this, and we shall reconquer the Crimean Peninsula and get the weapons that will allow us to hit targets on the territory of Crimea and ruin the chains of supply. So let's not be scared, let's not fear anymore.
Congressman Davis, but it would be not about that, but I would refer to you not just to as the congressman from North Carolina, but the American military who served in the airborne troops. Is it possible to isolate Russian troops while fighting this war without proper fighting jets? Do you think that would be the questions from Ukrainians?
Well, I want to first say it's truly an honor to be here. This is my first trip to Ukraine and my first conference here, and I plan, hopefully, to be back. With that being said, I want to be clear. The reason I am here, and the reason I took the time to come, is because I realize that there's been a lot of politics taking place in the United States. And there's been a lot that's been on the line. I listened to the soldier earlier, and he made clear that while all these conversations are taking place, that there are many who are giving their lives, their souls for Ukraine and for democracy. And I wanted to be here because I want to be clear with each and every one of you. We are doing everything we can, and I believe you will see us deliver. I believe that. And you're going to see us standing with Ukraine. I do understand the timeliness, and there are many internal politics that we're dealing with, but I wanted to come to be here representing not only North Carolina, but the United States of America to stand united with Ukraine. And it's been worth it.
Thank you.
With that being said, I served my country in the United States Air Force. And obviously, there are many different parts of this that are important. But in tongue-in-cheek, there's no way possible we can do it without a total force. And the Air Force is going to be really important. I do know that there are efforts underway in particular to get more F-16s out. One thing that comes to my mind, to my attention, is making sure that we create a pipeline, to the training to make sure we have then dedicated pilots that's able to perform.
I'll have a more broad question because I'm quite sure there would be a question like on the imminent, we will go to that rather soon, about the imminent issue like the voting in the Congress and other things. But about Ukraine as, the force and the country as an ally on which US see as, long-lasting ally. We know, for instance, that in case of Taiwan, which produce the chips, the others don't, there are even considerations that today these chips might be produced somewhere in Texas because it's so volatile to have them in Taiwan. And that is our question. Ukraine, we heard a lot from our heroes, that we have the very innovative troops. Also, it's not really any longer about which weapon is better. It's about who is the first to invent something and then invent something in 2 months and then invent something else in 2 months. That's exactly what Ukrainian is learning, how to be inventive. So you would have, we're trying to build this, when we have free hands, the army which is capable to do that. Where do you see this country and this type of army can be in the chain of defense in the US in the long perspective, so the Russia and the Russian allies would be isolated?
I want to continue to come back to this notion in the midst of all of the, I would use the word linger or uncertainty that's taking place right now in terms of delivering security assistance. I want to be clear. We have made investments, $75 billion. We're in this. We are in this. And I believe it has been important for us to be here with Ukraine, and we've been with Ukraine early. Now, with that being said, something that I think is noteworthy, we have to all step back for a second and look at defense supply chain. That's huge. What we're doing in the United States, in particular, we kind of step back for a second to look at this. Let's use, for example, the semiconductors. We realized we needed to do more production in the U.S. Because at the end of the day, we have interdependent defense supply chain. But what you saw that's taking place in the 117th Congress, there was a $53 billion investment that was actually made through the Chips and Science Act. What that is designed to do is to look really two things in particular. Look at how we're able to advance technology, research, development, innovation, and then the other part in particular, we're really trying to ramp up production with semiconductors. This is, I think, an example that perhaps we can all learn and that we need to continue in terms of the West and our allies. Look at all the lessons that we can learn from this. And we have lessons, yes, that we can learn, and that we have to continue to ramp up, expand efforts. To me, I think that's an example, cutting edge work that now we're really beginning to see rolled out. And by the way, hear what I'm about to say, that was a bipartisan bill. That was a bipartisan bill. So I'm saying that to say it's going to be important now more than ever to deliver on security assistance. And part of what's standing in the way is getting to bipartisanship. But that same bipartisanship is moving us forward to be able to look at how do we respond better to research, development, innovations, and deal with the interconnected defense supply chain.
Thank you. And Mr. Kubilius, you know everything. We know your moral position is crystal clear, as well as the support. Can you just explain to the people in this room as well why Russia hasn't been isolated yet, including inside of by the European Union, and what to do with that? Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot. Very good question, and thanks a lot for all the conference and what Yalta conference really is doing for the last, I don't know how many years. So it's great to be again. I will answer to your question, with maybe also question. We need to answer to a very simple question: why the West, including European Union and United States, are still afraid to say that Russia needs to be defeated? When we shall say that Russia needs to be defeated, when we shall say that Russia needs to be defeated, then we shall have much more, clear answers to all the details. Unfortunately, that is still not the case. I can repeat, and I hope that in this hall, quite many who will repeat, Russia needs to be defeated, and Ukraine needs to win, and we are not afraid of Ukrainian victory, and we are not afraid of Russia to be defeated. But that is not the case in some capitals. If you will look into discussions, you will see that really, there are worries. What will happen if Russia will be defeated? Putin regime will collapse, and maybe something even worse will come. That is, still influential way of thinking in Western capitals. And that is why West, I don't know who decided, but what I see really is that the Western policy, to support Ukraine is, what I would call, or in the war against Russia, the policy is of these tactics, boiling the frog. What does it mean? You are raising temperature very slowly, and maybe at some time, Russians will become tired of the war and they will, retract from Ukraine. I'm afraid that if that tactic will prevail, the question will be who will become tired, earlier. I will not talk about Ukraine. I don't see, I know that you will not become tired, to defend yourself. But the West really is not so sure, about how long West will continue. So that's why my understanding is very simple, maybe too simplified, but I think that sometimes we need to go down to simple, thinking. The West needs to have a very clear plan of the victory of Ukraine. I started to push that, in European Parliament, in our political group, because what is the problem? We are talking quite a lot about, I saw this debate about Taurus, about ATACMS. We can look, then where somebody decides to give, 20 F-16s, everybody is very happy. But if you will look into financial side of the war, you will see where we are. I, looked into public data, and the situation is, which made me quite, worried about. Russia spent last year 100 billion euros for the war in Ukraine, even more. Americans announced now that 2 years evaluation is 220. So I mean, 110, maybe even more. What Russians spent for the war. Ukrainian side, with all our assistance, American, European, member states, peace facility, managed to collect only 80 billion euros of military support, which means very clear that our support to Ukraine allows Ukraine not to lose the war, but is far short from victory possibilities. We need to see that really our support to Ukraine needs to be, 2 or 3 times bigger than we were delivering now. It's very simple, You can look into those calculations. Unfortunately, when we are looking again, more deeply into the numbers, Ukrainians are spending 25% of their GDP for the defense. Russians are spending from 6 to 7%. The whole European Union assistance last year was 0.1% of total, GDP of European Union. Americans were a little bit better, 0.11. Now that's different. So that is what we need to understand. What is our priority? When we shall, agree that we need to have the plan how we are assisting really and how we are achieving victory of Ukraine, then we shall have everything else, in place. And sanctions will be implemented much more effectively. But if we are, afraid to say that Russia needs to be defeated, then, there is no need to explain very much about, why we are failing in some of those details.
We go to the questions, so you can already pass the mic. I see one, then the second. First to Olha, here. Yeah. Then to Lana.
Good afternoon. My name is Olga Ivazovska of Civil Network Opora NGO, and I have very direct questions because it's going to be elections in Russia. And we are speaking about defeating Russia, we are speaking about isolation of Russia. What about president of Russia? This person is going to be president in a 5th time officially and in a 6th time unofficially. And the question is about democracies. How democracies can accept this position that self-nominated person, president, is going to be official and the head of the state which started aggression against democracies? Are we speaking about so-called fake democracies or double standards in this sphere, or we will name it as it has to be named? So this person is very confident to be president, but he can be named as a president after March this year because he killed all opposition representatives in his country. He had this position about foreign agents, and none of NGO can work openly in Russia. There is no any free and fair and open media in Russia. So what about him? Let's speak about him personally, because he is very selfish and confidential on this situation. Thank you for your initiative in the European Parliament, but what about official position of our international partners about him personally? Thank you. And
I want to stress that Olha is running the organization which is, pivotal for election accountability and transparency. So, Alexander,
to me, question.
Yes,
well,
I think you can. Take
it. I can just, answer repeating your words. First of all, those will be not elections. We need to, to stress that. How to call that procedure? I don't know. Still, we have some kind of this, semantic problem that still we're calling it elections, despite the fact that all of us, we know that those are not elections. Second, really, I hope that we now in the Parliament we shall discuss after so-called elections, and there are initiatives, to declare that his legitimacy is over. But in any case, I see one issue, all the contacts with so-called president needs to start from very simple procedure. Everybody who wants to meet with Putin, first of all, needs to bring to him arrest warrant from Hague Tribunal. That is precondition of everything else.
Alex, do you have a remark?
Yes, this was a really important topic of discussion when the United Kingdom members of Parliament met with members of the Rada, and that there are a number of important points that either the credible opposition candidates have been killed or not been allowed to run. So this is not an election in any way, shape or form that we would recognise, and the elections are being run in the sovereign territory of Ukraine as well, in Crimea and Donbass. And that's not Russia, clearly not Russia. And those elections, therefore, even without, even if it had credible candidates, would be non-credible elections. So it's not an election. Putin is merely extending his own term of office. But he's still going to be the head of state. He is still going to be prosecuting the war. We should think about it in both ways. He is still responsible for Russia, its armed forces and its economy, and we need to attack him in that way, but not recognize the legitimacy of his position.
I'd like to give a comment to Catalina Gomez, who is a brilliant Colombian journalist, but also who is survivor and witness of one of the war crimes which happened in Kramatorsk this summer, where one of our dear friends passed away. Catalina, your comment.
I was just coming from South America, especially from Colombia. When you talk about how isolate Putin from South America, basically looks impossible. I mean, it is a war that sadly it's really far away from them. They are really close to the human suffering, what is happening in the front line with the people who are dying and with the soldiers who are sacrificing their life. But after talking to so many people, I think that this distrust towards America, the West, what they have done in many parts of the world, not just in South America, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, it makes them not to understand really that probably Russia is doing this colonialism in Ukraine and in this area. And for them, this is something that is not related with the history, and they don't touch them very close. Then the question, and it's really unclear, and it's not really clear what to do, is how really to make people in Latin America, Africa, and other countries of the world to understand that Russia is an imperialism state, and they are trying to impose and do things that they really criticize from the United States, but Russia is doing in a very, in more violent and low way that in certain ways they criticize what the big neighbor did. Then this is a big guess to do in the next years, is how we are going to tell Global South, isolate Putin.
Something which was discussed a lot. I know that Lana has a question, so please.
Thank you so much. Lena Kazarny, I'm CEO of Horizon Capital and also the chair of the board of American Chamber of Commerce. This is a question to Congressman Davis and also Member of Parliament Alex Sobel. Look, seizing the Russian frozen assets is a high priority. We discussed this in Davos. We have a limited amount of time. Who knows what the political winds can change. We literally have 6 months to do this. And what I really would love to hear what you are doing in your respective parliaments and in Congress. We know about the Repo Act for Ukrainians and other bipartisan initiatives, but clearly this requires political will. And it requires the US, UK, Japan, Europe to move simultaneously, and it requires urgency. We have very little time. Western taxpayers cannot pay for this forever when $350 billion of Russian central bank frozen assets are sitting in the hands of Western governments. We understand there's legal issues and there have been found workarounds, but the political will has got to be there. You got to turn around to the central banks and say, you're not in charge of national security. This is a national security issue. We have got to get that money to the Ukrainians ASAP. Thank you.
Congressman.
I couldn't agree more with you. We definitely need to seize the Russian assets and get them to Ukraine. There was a bill that moved through the House, and it's over in the Senate. The Senate's working on a version of the bill right now. I would say, broadly speaking, and you've outlined, clearly what, the balancing act is here, dealing with really unprecedented law and making sure that we're not doing it in a way that's going to interrupt a broader economy. With that being said, what I believe we should continue to move down the pathway is, one, doing it in a narrow way. This is about how it's done. I don't believe it's about if you do it. I believe there is political will, believe it or not, to do it. The whole conversation is how to do it. I believe it has to be narrow. I believe it should be multilateral in terms of we have to do it in a more broad way, and instead of making this unilateral. And I believe this is something we will see progress on.
Do you have a comment?
Yeah,
we have still one last question.
Yeah, in the UK, we have absolute political consensus on Ukraine, what needs to be done. But sometimes there is a difference in parties about speed and what they want to do. Last July, our party laid a motion before the House of Commons for the siege and repurpose of Russian assets. The government didn't support that. They're not ready yet. There are many members of the Conservative Party who do support it, so it's a matter of time. We also have an election like the US in the UK this year, so you might see a change of policy, there's a change of government. But the United Kingdom Foreign Office is currently fighting cases in the courts. It's won 5 cases, not from the state, but from individual Russians, on the frozen assets. And winning all the cases and continuing to win cases, another one's going to court very soon, gives more confidence legally about seizing and repurposing the assets. So we're nearly there. But the big prize is the Euroclear money, 300 billion, which lots of states have their money sat there. And we need to give cover to the Belgian government and Euroclear so they're confident that that money can go and that they will not be exposed. So it's all of our responsibilities, all the other countries that are here, to give that assurance and that cover.
You have the question. We have just very brief.
Іван Пепеляшко.
It will be in Ukrainian, so yeah, if you can.
Гість даного заходу.
Ivan Pobleshko, I'm a guest. Last week, I buried my friend. He was a helicopter pilot. He was killed doing his duty. He wasn't covered by aviation and trying to use his firepower without this cover. So for offensive, we need prevalence in the air. This is a well-established fact. So delaying with the fight now, with the aircrafts, the F-16s, we risking the lives of those helicopter pilots with a very small chance of survival for them. We are not talking about victory tomorrow if we receive those fighter aircrafts the day after tomorrow.
Congressman, would you take it? I know it shouldn't be a rhetoric question. That's very important. It shouldn't be the question which is like doesn't have an answer, as we all agree and shake our heads. Sorry. What would you say? Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes. So I'm saying like the question was, I didn't want it to be a rhetoric question that like we all agree there should be some air support, but when?
Right.
The question was very clear, very realistic.
You say when?
Yeah. When Ukraine can have more.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, because I was plugging in and I think I heard the part about a friend that had been killed in a helicopter, if I understood correctly. And definitely, my heart goes out there, and it highlights the importance of actually the need for, getting aircraft out there. And obviously, this is something that needs to happen, in a very timely manner. And, I can definitely, tell you part of what I'm taking back is a lot of the concerns that have been conveyed to me today. I mean, I'm hearing your concern loud and clear, and we're definitively going back to amplify what's been shared here today. So I really appreciate it. Obviously there's a larger, process that, politically we have to go through. But I would say thank you for sharing, because this empowers me to go back, and I'm sure others too, to go back and continue to advocate.
Thank you, everybody. We do not have time for the closing remarks, because if we do that, the list is so long on what should be done, it can take forever. But that would be, maybe something of that would be asked about in the next panel.